Hi there, and welcome to today's demonstration. Um, this is this is the last demonstration of this little term that I've been doing, and in some respects, it's probably a more ambitious undertaking than I imagined, which is to try and film myself outside. I'm using a GoPro camera, and I can't actually see the scene when I'm as I'm doing it, so it's a bit like potluck really. And I was a bit concerned that I hadn't exposed the drawing enough, but I thought it might be enough. What I want to show you really is the not so much this is how to draw, but it's more a case of the general attitude I have when I'm sort of sketching outdoors. And I was thinking afterwards that I'm probably still somewhat influenced by years ago seeing I had a great book on Pierre Bonnard, and I'll put one of his pictures up here, and you can see a very sort of loose, sketchy style. Okay, and for me, I think this really helps me. There are different sort of moods to drawing, different ways of approaching it. But when I'm outside, I like this sort of. I think of it as a bit scribbly. It's a bit loose, and it's not the only way that I would draw. Sometimes I would draw perhaps with an easel and do it in a bit more of a measured way. But this is really about just enjoying being outdoors and just making some marks and seeing what happens really. So it's as much about the rhythm of the mark making as it is about accuracy. Having said that, I am doing a lot of looking, and the marks are responses to visual experience, and this is what I meant when I said about the importance of looking. Okay, so as long as your marks are correlated with something that you've seen, that's going to help. It's when you get your head down and just start sort of making it up, that's when things can go. You won't capture the mood or the atmosphere. So the approach that I'm taking here is very much continuous line drawing, and this is a sort of technique. It's a great sort of way to loosen up and just to start drawing. And what I was thinking here was, by the way, this is my allotment. Actually, that's not it itself. This is the at the top sort of tier. It's on quite a steep hill. I say if that was my allotment, I'd have a bit of work cut out for me. But at the top, it's sort of left as a bit of a nature, sort of almost like wild sort of garden, really. But as you can see, there's a great view out over Ipswich, and so I thought I'll go up there and see if I can find a spot and something worth looking at. So I went up there, and of course the first thing I decided to have a go at was this nice sort of vista of Ipswich. Um, but as you can see, once I got settled, I find one drawing leads onto another, leads onto another. And that won't happen if you set yourself up with the attitude of I'm just going to do one finished piece. Okay, so this is I was talking about when you're working outdoors, your attitude wants to be one of exploration and being open to the possibilities of what's around you. Um, and it may be, you might not come up with anything particularly inspiring or good. You know, it's one of the books I had on drawing was very good. It suggested that instead of thinking of your outcomes with drawing about how good a drawing, it's like, did you enjoy yourself? Did you enjoy making the marks? If you regard that as the criteria rather than the success of the drawing, you're going to relax into it a bit more. And that's somewhat the attitude I was taking here. This is in real time, so I didn't speed it up. And here's the first quick one. So that's about a 5-minute sketch. And just as you say, continuous line, no shading, just looking at outlines and just some relationship of shapes. So that was my first one. So yeah, 5 minutes, probably not a bad sort of time to set yourself. Say better to think quantity rather than quality when you're sketching outdoors, I find. And just get interested in things. Once you've done the obvious one, then look around you and see, well, is there anything else that jumps out at you? So I rotated my gaze slightly to a tree there with some sunflowers in front of it, and I thought I'll give that a go. But still done with this, all the drawings I did today were done with this sort of continuous line. And I like to think of it as a bit like on the back of an envelope, more of a sort of, I say, you're sort of taking a line for a walk. That's one of the phrases that comes to mind. And just seeing what happens. So I'm using a charcoal pencil. So charcoal pencil is quite good for line drawing because you can use pressure to create a variety of marks. But as you see a bit later, I did also switch medium, so it's nice to have a few options to hand. And it was really nice to sit up there. As I say, the weather was quite changeable this morning, so it was the wind. Nice to sit there with the wind going through the grass. And that's not just it's not just a side issue. It's something that happens when you're painting outdoors. The feeling of being in nature, it starts to affect you. It relaxes you, and it can put you in a slightly different state. I mean, this is one of the reasons people like going outdoors, going for walks, and that will have an effect on your artwork. You'll create different artwork outdoors than you will do sitting in your studio. So this is why it's a great thing to incorporate into your practice as an artist. I've had a little project actually, which is to film myself painting outdoors. It's a project that has been sort of in the pipeline for about 2 or 3 years now, and I've tried various different setups. This isn't ideal because perhaps we're not in quite close enough to the drawing, but actually the GoPro, the picture is very nice of the surroundings, so I quite like that. I've also played around with having the GoPro on a sort of, you put it around your chest and then you can sort of see what you're doing, but every time you move your body it wobbles the camera, and that can make for a slightly sort of, it's a bit nauseating to watch. So this was just on a little tripod sticking over my shoulder. So that was that sketch. Little suggestion of the sunflowers. And then I rotated again. This time I'm looking straight ahead over, for those of you that know Ipswich, over Spring Road. And there was a nice view through the trees. And as you can see here, I switched to a more vertical composition. So continuous line is really just one tool of many in terms of adopting different ways of drawing. So some of the things that I like to do in life drawing are you sort of often what you're trying to do is to work a little bit more loosely, okay, and that's just because in the tendency to focus on particular things, you happen to be engaging more of your left brain. Okay, your left brain tends to focus on things. It's the part of your brain that would sort of sit there and try and work out the shape of each leaf. The right brain is more trying to get a feeling of the scene as a whole. How do the parts interact? What's important? So instead of each branch, how does the edge of the tree, the contour meet the sky, and how does that frame up the rest of the work? So certain ways of drawing lend themselves to this way of thinking. Continuous line is one of them. Other things might be drawing with your wrong hand. I said drawing quickly. Working with big bits of paper and charcoal. Things that actually feel like they lessen your control, that they seem to activate that slightly more freer way of drawing. And as I say, this is why at the beginning of a life drawing session you often start with quick poses. The quick poses, they force you to make some marks, and they just help to overcome the inner critic. So for those of you that know that book, what's it called? Is it The Artist's Journey, I think? There's a very good exercise in there called the morning pages. This is a way to unlock creativity. And in the morning pages, what you do is every morning you get up and you're meant to fill up about 3 pages of A4, and you just write anything that comes into your mind. And so you might just repeat the same word or sort of nonsense, or you might start to say things. But you really just focus on filling up those pages. And what happens is, because you become less concerned, it's not about anyone reading it, you might not even read it yourself, you help to bypass the inner critic. And this is a great tool for freeing up creativity. Even I know this, is that obviously having the camera there, after a while of doing these drawings, I'm a bit sort of freer and looser than my first one, and there's a subtle sort of desire to get it right, and that's not always good for creativity. So working in this sort of quick way, it's a bit similar to the morning pages, and you could think of it more like just trying to fill up a sketchbook as opposed to make a great drawing. You'll find a different quality of mark than if you sort of you're out there just trying to make a good drawing. But it's not an easy thing, and as I say, there's a tendency to want to get pulled into detail and to correct things. So in another circumstance, I might transition from doing these sort of looser, more scribbly sketches to making more measured drawings, actually trying to look at the relationships in a more sort of patient manner. So this isn't the final word, as it were, in terms of how to draw, but I find this is just a good place to start off, because often what happens is you go out to do a drawing and you just don't know where to start. You don't feel particularly inspired, you don't see anything that looks particularly, that would make a good drawing. So just doing loads of this sort of stuff, it will help you sort of get past that point. some of the best some of the best books I've read on drawing and sketching. I've talked in my classes about urban sketching and using sort of small, like moleskin sketchbooks. All of these things, what you're trying to do is get into the habit of drawing. Okay, and so you're trying to, a great bit of advice, which I'm sure every artist, would benefit from, is doing a bit of drawing every day. Unfortunately, it's not as straightforward as that, and the reason is because you just think you haven't got time. You sort of think, and again, it's this pressure to do a really good drawing. So here we are. There's the little sketch. As you can see, some suggestions of windows there. Okay, and then on to my final drawing, line drawing. So this time I switched to using a fine line pen. So problem here is, you don't get variety of line, but I figure whilst I'm out there and I've got some different options, I would try with a fine line pen. And as you can see, unfortunately, the contrast means it's a little bit hard to see what's going on there. But I'd say the main thing I'm trying to show you is just the sort of, the speed and the just the general approach, really, which is just to, get stuck in there. Butterflies. So I'm going camping later in August, and I'm hoping to do a bit of sketching there, as you can see. So, I did edit this one a little bit, just to sort of speed it up. It's not the best picture. There we go. And because we take so much stuff, it might be difficult for me to take my easel. So I will probably be doing a bit of this sort of work. I mean, it's a great opportunity being on holiday to do a bit of sketching. But I think between not doing anything at all and scribbling out a few sketches like this, I think this is definitely the better thing to do. It keeps your eye in, and keeps your drawing, your art practice in mind. Having said that, I also think it's good. It's good to have a couple of weeks off, and it's a strange thing about learning a skill. I think you can you fill up your brain. You do a lot of practice, quite intense practice, where you're really sort of pushing yourself. You're trying to develop things. Then if you have a complete rest and forget about it, I often find when you come back, something has shifted. Some of it has gone a little bit deeper. So it's quite an interesting. Thing. So I do quite like to have, I often find at the end of the term, I'm sort of keen to have a little bit of a break. But being outdoors and doing a bit of work like this has sort of got me inspired at the moment. So we'll see what unfolds. And what really interests me is just the contrast between the work that I produce outdoors from the work I produce in a studio. This has got more, also like, sometimes drawing, when we talked about developing style, I think it's in this sort of, when you're drawing quickly like this, you'll probably see more, get more of a sense of your personal style than if you spend ages on a painting in a studio, because then you can refine it and refine it and refine it, and you'll lose something of the more sort of intuitive mark making that you would get from a quick drawing. But it's nice to compare those two processes. Other artists, as well as Bonnard, that I would suggest having a look at. There's a great artist called Dick Lee. If ever you get a chance to, if you look him up on Google, look at his work, I think he's another great example of someone who worked from life and just had a really interesting approach to mark making. And when I look at his paintings, there's something about the, you get the feeling of this right brain sort of mode, is that he wasn't looking so much at things but more about relationships and sort of seeing as an artist sees. So as you can see, I sort of got quite, once I got going, I got quite into it. And as I say, that's the great thing. It's often starting is the hardest part with drawing. You just have to sort of push yourself to get going. And what was a bit of a shame with this outing is my next one is my tonal study. As you can see, just have a look at this one. There we are. So that's looking across from the allotment towards Spring Road. It's a quite abstract mark making really, but you can sort of see a suggestion, and yeah, I was quite pleased with that. So here I am, I've got my, I decided to do my monochrome, my tonal painting with Payne's Grey watercolour paint, and I've also got some titanium white, which is an opaque colour, a bit like white gouache. It didn't actually in the end require a great deal of the white, and I did make a little bit of a mess as the water sort of spilled over into the container there. And again, this was a nice way to work, just focusing on tonal values, no initial drawing, and just straight in there, getting the tones in. A bit of a suggestion of sky there, and then I started with a bit of wet in wet, so just dropping some particularly interested, as I say, it's the initial drawing I did, which is the sort of vista, the view of some of those buildings down the docks in Ipswich, and they were sort of nicely framed up by some trees, so I thought that was what caught my eye. So as you can see, the little dog motif sort of still there from having a look at the Impressionists last week. And again, this is how it all starts to build up. You learn a bit here, learn a bit there, and it all starts to sort of feed into something. unfortunately I can't show you a picture of the view this time. But so you have to just assume it looks like that. But really, in some respects, I mean, watercolor is a great example that, you know, if I could have taken a photograph of this scene, taken it back to the studio and worked it into a painting, okay, then that would be sort of one perfectly valid approach to it. In the process of doing the watercolor, though, the brush and the paper, the way the paint behaves, it's forcing me to simplify, and this is what makes for you know, a good painting. It's the process of simplification, trying to get down to the essence of the scene, and that's why, again, having almost a bit less control can work to your advantage. Dropping in the dots for the sky there. Sorry, dots of the tree. It's a great, I mean, the allotment is a good place to do some studies. Because I had my tripod, I was sort of, I was a bit reluctant to go and find different views, but that is something else. I think also once you've done a few and you get warmed up, it would be good to sort of stand up, walk around. I find, to say, after I've been doing a bit of painting or drawing, you're going to see potential subjects a bit easier. You're going to sort of tune into them. Often it's about like tonal values and maybe the way the light's catching something. So for those of you that did my composition, this is a bit like a U-shaped composition. So the tree and this branch here, I think this was an apple tree, quite characteristic of the way it sort of loops down. And that frames up our interest in the middle. And I'm using the darker tone in the foreground to push back. So that's incorporating some of that atmospheric perspective theory we did a couple of weeks ago. Watercolors, you're always building up. You have to assume everything's going to be lighter, so you're slowly building up, and that's where it's you know, you initially try and hold back on the lights and build up as you go. Unfortunately, it's a real shame, as I say, my camera died just in a while, so we will be quite the skip ahead to my final painting. At least hopefully it's given you some clues as to how to go about this project, and I say I'll be out doing this again over the summer. So here was the final painting that I came up with. So as you can see, I did use the titanium white. I sort of darkened the sky slightly and made the buildings just ever so slightly lighter, as I thought that was a bit more interesting than dark shape. They are quite light buildings actually, the facade. So and as you can see, just varying the tonal values, varying the mark making, and using the dark foreground to push back the distance. Anyway, so I hope you found that useful. And as I say, this is it with sketching. You go out, you win some, you lose some, but the main thing is to try and enjoy the journey, and you know, to revisit the scene. If something comes up to you, you can go back out there another time with your paints and maybe turn it into a more developed study. But this is an initial sort of way of getting out into nature and making a start with your sketchbooks. Anyway, so I hope you found that useful. Look forward to seeing what you do at the end of the week. And as I say, I'll be here on Friday to give everyone some feedback for my last feedback session for this term anyway. Anyway, thanks for watching. Thumbs up, always much appreciated. And I'll see you again on Friday. Thanks a lot. Bye.